here this morning. So this is our inaugural HIFIS 4 training. I know you're all chomping at the bit. Can't wait to get going. We're in for a fun day. How many hours is?
3 maximum.
We got you locked away for 3 hours.
You'll have a really fun rest of your day after you leave.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot to cover. HIFIS 4 is different. So have all of you used HIFIS 3.8? I know several of you have, some faces I don't recognize. So we're going to be going through HIFIS 4. The biggest difference in HIFIS 4 is that it's now web-based. If you remember with the HIFIS 3.8 that we have currently, there is a big login process. We have to use RSA key fobs. You have to log into the VPN. There's several steps. Right off the bat, we're just going to be going directly to the URL for our new HIFIS 4 installation that will be shared come the launch date. We will be sending out some of these links to you shortly for your shelters to be able to start testing on our development servers that we have. But you'll see there's no extra RSA key fobs, there's no retinal scans, there's no blood samples, there's no nothing. We're just going to log in. Your shelters have, we've already talked to some of your technical people at your shelters, and they've provided us with your IP addresses so that only your shelters and on-site location can connect to it. One of the really cool features about HIFIS 4 is that as long as any device that is web-enabled, like your cell phones, your tablets, your laptops, anything that is connected to your shelter's wireless, or your shelter's network, it could be plugged in or whatever, you can access HIFIS 4. So there's no installs. You're not going to have to worry about having it just in one location at your shelter. But this does mean you cannot go outside. You can't, if you're using data on your cell phone, you can't connect to it because it's not a part of your internal network. You can't do it from home. So it's very secure and kept to your one spot. So as I had mentioned before, HIFIS 4 does have a lot of new features, or a lot of different ways and different workflows. And Angela is going to be going through all those different and fun new ways. So keep an open mind. It is very intuitive, but it is going to be different from some of the processes that you were used to before. So before we start going, we'll do some introductions around. And for anybody that's web connected and doing this through webinar, if there's any questions at all, you can call 613-580-2424, and the extension here would be 82542. So that's 613-580-2424, extension 8252, and I'm sure that people can post it in the chat as well if they have any questions. So we'll start off with our lovely host. So first, I guess I should say my name is Steve Bolgen, and I handle most of the back end, all the technical stuff.
Yes. Hi. If we haven't met already, I'm Angela Jones. I'm the other HIFIS community coordinator, and I get to share the magic of HIFIS 4 with you today, this morning. Not all day, don't worry. I have worked with HIFIS here at the city for the last 12 years, but I've also worked at shelters and at different service providers in the community as an actual HIFIS user. So I have a pretty good understanding of how you folks tend to use it on a day-to-day basis. You'll notice that you don't have, but before we kind of get around to intros to everybody else, you might be panicked that you don't have any paper material, and that's on purpose. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, that's me. So if you want to just say your name, where you're from, and if there's any specific things that you want to target today while we're chatting. So we'll start with you, my friend.
My name is Leland. I'm a case manager at the Ottawa mission. Nothing specific that we want to target, but yeah.
All right.
Len McMillan. I'm at St. Mary's Home, shelter for young single moms and their babies. And I'm hoping it'll be easier to, when my moms come home from the hospital, I don't have to lock them up. I'm hoping that's easier this time.
Hi, I'm Heather Jeffrey. I'm a caseworker at the family shelter. I just want to learn it all, Angela.
Yeah, you do.
Maybe it's a little faster, more user friendly. Hopefully, that's my hope.
Good morning, my name is Michelle Paquette. I work for YCU Studio, and I'm with the organization.
I worked there for 15 years, so. Okay, we're introducing you two in the back, my roadies.
Hi, I'm Deanna Vedrelli. I am the program coordinator for Canadian Family Shelters. I'm here in a limited tech support role. And I'll help with any, like, right now we're supposed to have quite a few people on the webinar, so we want to kind of field those questions in a way that makes sense. So I'm mostly here for support.
And I'm kind of primary tech support at this time, just making sure we get the webinar up and running. But I'll be this group. Oh, and my name's Kim, sorry.
Awesome. All right. So, quick housekeeping things. So as I mentioned, you don't have any paperwork, and for me that's intentional for two reasons. One, the scaled down version of the kind of train the trainer like job aid material is 50 pages. So I don't want to kill that many trees, and I figure most people might prefer to kind of have it emailed to them, or you can download it, or you can do whatever you want with it. Also, I find that especially in computer training, when you have kind of the step-by-steps in front of you, then we're not paying attention to the other things that can be kind of going on. So I want you to focus on, this magical face, or at least the magical voice for the webinar people. And again, very casual. If you have questions, doesn't matter if I'm in the middle of something or if you're in the middle of something, just let me know. We are going to have a break at some time. I'm not sure of the exact moment, halfway through-ish. If you need a break before then, by all means, feel free to step out. The washrooms are close to the elevators, just on the other side. And I'm actually going to leave my work pass that you need to kind of get back in here. You're on the desk if anybody needs to run to the washroom before break. I think that's it. So I also decided no PowerPoint, because who likes PowerPoint? Not me. Who's like, who hates PowerPoint? C'est moi. But we are going to go through some of the basics. So I know that this is, all of you have used HIFIS before. Do all of you do case? Yes, you all do case management of some kind, yes? So yes. So I'm just in my head, some of the folks who are with us via webinar may not all do case management or may not all do SPDATs or whatnot, but I'll make sure to focus on those things. So again, we're going to go through kind of some pieces. We're going to have some interactive steps where you're going to log on and we're going to do some of this stuff together, or you will have some exercises to do. But you feel free to sit back and just kind of listen, participate, whatever you want, and we'll go in kind of an order. But if you want to jump, like I said, to a certain section before I kind of get there, that's cool. So it's your morning. We'll do however you like. And yeah, so any initial questions? No? I will take notes if there's anything that's pressing, so I don't forget it later, because my early onset Alzheimer's. So this, if you haven't already gotten to the page from Google Chrome, you're going to type in demo.hifis.ca and enter. So this is the demonstration page, obviously from ESDC, so Employment Skills Development Canada. They the information that we're putting in here now, it's refreshed. I'm not sure. I can't remember if it's every 2 days or if every 3 days. But if all of a sudden you go and enter a brand new client, for funsies or whatever today, and if you went back in a few days, it's going to be gone. So just to be aware that it will refresh itself, and hopefully it doesn't refresh itself while we're mid-session this morning. So fingers crossed. So you'll notice when you get to this login page, and again, if I'm going too fast or if you're getting some sort of error, just kind of put up your hand and one of us will kind of come over and get to you. So you're actually going to, if you want to, you can log in. You'll notice that there's 3 things that you have to enter now for login. So it's not just your username and your password, but your username, your password, and the service provider that you want to sign in with at the time. I'm just going to pick shelter A. You can pick whichever shelter that you want. And is everybody in okay? No? Like, no, I don't want, never save this password.
I missed the password.
The password is the 123456. Okay, all good? Awesome. So hold on, I'm gonna scroll up a little bit. My screen is kind of blown up a little bit extra large, so it might look a little more expanded than yours. Don't worry. So you'll notice that, welcome to HIFIS, first of all. HIFIS 4, it's laid out differently because it needs to be in line with any other federal web page style guide. So if you went to go to Canadian Revenue Agency, if you went to go and apply for a passport, with Service Canada, employment insurance, whatever, it's all kind of laid out in a similar way. So that's the style that's here. So it's all drop-down menus. They usually start at the left and they kind of work over. And we'll kind of go through what some of these buttons mean, just the initial part at least of having to navigate. So these menus up top, just at least, again, feel free to, like, if you hover or click over any button in HIFIS, it's going to tell you what it actually does, or it's going to take you to a something. So you won't be totally lost. The biggest change from HIFIS 3 to HIFIS 4 is this client search button or field that's in the top right corner. So instead of having to kind of go into front desk and then into reception and then have to look for a client, you can technically bypass all that and just start searching for somebody immediately. You can type in any 3 letters. So if I were to type in, for example, Smith and hit enter, it's going to give me the list of anybody with Smith in their name. It could be Smith as a last name. It could be Smith as a first name. It could be Smith as a middle name. It could be Smithson, like anything. So you can obviously narrow that down with, sorting by first or last name or whatever. If you want to sort by name instead, you can go and do whatever. But that's at least a really quick way to kind of get to any client that you're looking for, if you know that they already exist in the system. But if I want to get back to kind of that, reload. There we go. This bulletins page that is popping up right now, bulletins are kind of, if you don't use them already, it's kind of an electronic message, or that you would normally put kind of in a logbook or whatever for other staff. And it's defaulted right now to kind of show up as soon as you log in. We are about to be logged out, Kale. Yep. Something restarty. Well, of course.
Of course, the one you can't restart. Well, keep going, and in 15 minutes we can take a short break.
Nothing we can do about those ones, unfortunately. Angela, you said we can search by last name, or how do you do that?
In this client search button, or search field, sorry, up top, again, you can just start typing whichever you want. And then you can either click on that kind of magnifying glass to search, or you can just hit on the enter button on your keyboard and it will find anybody with that sequence of letters. I think the minimum amount of letters you have to type is 3. We adjusted it. It used to be 2, but 2 is kind of, will give you, like, considering we have over 70,000 unique clients in our HIFIS database, not the demo one, but we figured that we should probably up that to 3. But again, if I want to go back to kind of that main front desk, this bulletins pop-up thing, like I said, we are going to be turning that off, so you'll just kind of proceed to the regular screen once you log in. But up top in this top right corner, if you want to use HIFIS in French, you can just click on the Francais, and everything is apparently translated a la federal government. And if that's not the case, I expect my French folks here to tell me otherwise, because I'd like to be able to go back and be like, ha-ha! But I'm going to operate this in English. The other thing that it tells you up in this top right corner is what is your active service provider, because a number of you have more than one attached to your user, right? So you'll have, St. Mary's has prenatal and postnatal. The Mission has, young men's transitional shelter. Heather has like 26 to deal with. Yeah. With the family shelters and all of the offsite motels. Mission, I think, has like 6 or 7, I think. So depending on which one you are working with at that time, that's what it's going to show up as, and it'll show your username. So the information that's on the very bottom, I'm going to skip to that. Most of this, not important stuff. You can ignore a lot of that. If you're super, super nerdy, you can look at the build number, which is in really small letters in the bottom right corner. And that is actually helpful to us if you notice some sort of error or something is wonky in the system, because then when we go and connect with the ESDC technical folks, we can kind of confirm that we're talking about the same build. And the date also shows you when it was last updated. Yeah, go ahead.
Question. You change the shelter, do you have to completely log off and log back on?
We will get there.
Okay.
Yes. No. Don't be sorry. So the build that is shown here will show the date that it was last updated. With our current HIFIS 3, you may have noticed, like, we have randomly updated the build or the software, like, at random times. Sometimes it's like, twice in a month. Sometimes it might be once every, like, 5 months. It depends on when we get new releases. But this new system, they've committed to doing only 2 releases every year, in January and in May. So, and it will actually, that way we will know to anticipate that any changes or fixes that we need is going to happen. It's not going to be in a build that, it fixes one thing, but it breaks 17 other things. It will be properly tested and released at those times. But, if you want to look at, online training, whatever, there's different ways to kind of get to some of these same things. But at the bottom, a lot of it is kind of like boring administrative related stuff. You're welcome to click on some of this if you feel so inclined. The drop-down menus up top, similarly to HIFIS 3, you're going to be working mostly in the front desk section. So you'll notice when I click on that, it opens up a number of different options that you have available to you, kind of like the front desk with the visual squares of the different transactions. Anything that has that little arrow next to it means, like, you might be having a break in 10 minutes. We will be. If you click on that arrow next to any of them, it will show you the list of expanded options that that particular module has. So that way, if I want to go to housing placements versus housing units or whatever, I can select that. So these are all the things that relate to clients specifically, or your work with clients. So that's going to be like 99% of where you're spending your time. The next drop-down menu is communications. So there's an option right now for broadcast messages, bulletins, which we just, as we're seeing on the screen already, is kind of those electronic memos that you can have with other staff, and it can be attached to a client record. It can be, please don't let so-and-so in the building. It could be that, someone's coming to fix, the shower on the 3rd floor. It can be just a maintenance-related thing. Anything that you want to pass on to staff where it could just pop up, and, instead of having to write it in a logbook or pass it on verbally, you could do that there. And messaging is a new feature as well, where you can actually send internal IM email-ish messages to other HIFIS users at the time. So, I could email Michelle and say, could you please book out Deanna, because Deanna's actually shown up at my shelter door now. So, that'd be really great if you could do that then. or, if you need to change someone's name and you notice that they're staying at, or they have stayed at another shelter, you can always email somebody else from another shelter and give them that message saying, I changed the spelling of their name because I actually saw their health card and whatever. So you can send messages, you can receive messages, you can print them. The broadcast is, again, it's probably something, yeah, go ahead.
Should I get a message from someone? How would I be notified that I have a message? Would there be like a one somewhere?
Kind of like in CRMS where it's like blinky and it is more blatant than that. So hold on, inbox. I can go and add a message. And I'm just going to send it to myself for fun.
So we can send you messages from there.
You can send, you can send me messages. You can send each other messages.
If we have issues.
Yeah, it's like issues, subject, issues, definitely. And anything with the red star next to it means it's a mandatory field. So if you don't complete it, it's not going to allow you to save. I'm just going to type random letters into this message content box. When I hit send, then you'll notice, at least if I go to my inbox, it now has a message from me to me. And I would just click to open it. I could trash it, just like your regular email. I'm just going to cancel that. And you can also set up mailing lists. So if there's people that you would regularly, that you're going to be mailing, if there's certain people that you work with at another shelter that are in a similar role, or if you want Steve and I on your mailing list because you're sending us all your HIFIS issue stuff, that's fine. But that, again, it's an optional feature within HIFIS, but it is there, and it's kind of cool and helpful, especially the messaging thing. The pit count, we're not going to go into that today because been there, done that. We will have to do it again in 2020. But any of the options in that menu will be deactivated for all of us, including me, because I don't want anything to do with the pit count until 2020. Thank you. Reports, everyone will actually have access to reports, regardless of if you only have just viewing rights, all the way up to if you are, super user, case manager, whatever. And hold on. Helps to click on things. So the reports is going to look a little bit different. And it's like your computer is about to restart in 5 minutes. That was an email. So in HIFIS 3, we technically have two sets of reports. We have kind of what I like to call kind of the canned reports, like the built-in reports that's in the report section. And then we also have the, kind of billing and occupancy-related ones that are in HIFIS Plus. So the ones that we have created ourselves at the city are in HIFIS Plus. In this new, it's a one-stop shopping for any reports. And they're all created out of a secondary tool called Crystal Reports. So other communities who have Crystal Report, who might be using HIFIS, we can share reports with each other. If you happen to be a super expert Crystal Report programmer person, you can create your own report. But we will be able to customize a lot more reports. So instead of having to ask ESDC or to add certain fields that are really important for our agencies to report on, we'll be able to customize those. So you may see some of this list in here. All you would need to do, you will have access to, is just clicking on this like run report button. Under your regular accounts, you won't have the option to edit the kind of code in the background. But that being said, we are going to make sure that we have the essentials, because right now in HIFIS 3, I think there's 88 different reports in kind of the built-in report section. So we're not going to have all of those replicated. So we're planning on making sure that when we launch on November 21st, that we have like the essentials, obviously like billing report and occupancy and bed list and those kind of things. If there is something that you think needs to be developed sooner rather than in a month or whatever later, then please send us an email saying what that report is, or if there's a custom report that doesn't exist, but you're like, I have always needed a report on X, Y, and Z, then we would really like to be able to have that feedback, because right now we're making some guesses as to what's important based on what people ask us for already or what people are submitting. But at least know that this list can be adjusted. It can be, it's actually going to be really great opportunity, because Steve and I will be able to kind of create some of those reports ourselves and target the things that are a big issue these days. So that being said, okay, that is, I'm trying to run through. The administration drop-down menu, you're not necessarily going to have, actually, at least the people who are in this room, or anybody who has kind of either case management rights or is kind of a HIFIS site rep, they will have access to a couple of options within this administration menu, including client merge. And you'll be able to go and look at things like, the lookup table. So all the drop-down lists that appear in HIFIS right now, you won't be able to edit them, but you'll be able to at least see them or sort them in a way that makes sense. Same thing with, you'll be able to see all the different service providers or all the different users that are in there. You'll be able to view them. You won't be able to make changes, but you will have access to a number of different things.
Do we have access to the
Yes. So yes, and we'll make sure, like, again, that's part of kind of we have different rights templates right now, because we kind of have a standard front desk, shelter support worker kind of level. Then we have kind of the case managers, and then the site reps, or the kind of local administrators, and those two levels have access to the client merge. So, but if there is kind of a standard user who I think should be standard, and you're like, no, they really need rights to this other stuff, we can customize however makes sense for your agency. In this help menu, this is actually super, super helpful, unlike 3.8. So there is 4 things here. So a help center. So if for some reason I got hit by a bus and I didn't have a chance to send you my 50-page document, or you lost it on your computer or whatever, you can go to the help center, just like in Microsoft Word or whatever, and it's going to give you different topics and the common elements and blah, 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 that you'll be able to kind of see different things. It also has a training center. So then you're going to look at this, you'll be like, why am I here right now when I could be wherever I was doing this training center? Because it does have modules where it is step-by-step doing different activities. Some of them have some demonstration chunks. Some of them haven't been quite created yet, but they are kind of there for both basics, beyond the basics, and administration. So anybody can take any of those modules. There's also a glossary. So if you're not sure about some of the terminology that is used in HIFIS, or at least how HIFIS defines a certain thing, you'll be able to find that in here. And again, you can search for a specific one in the filter items field, or you can just say anything relating to a client or whatnot. And the last thing is the field dictionary. So this is kind of again, all of the drop-down menus that appear in HIFIS. Some of them are mandatory, some of them are not mandatory, and it will again give you
some of it's self-explanatory, but sometimes I find when I need to report for very specific things. No description of it.
We will make sure that they are added, because there is like a description column.
Yeah,
So
like I noticed on, what was I just looking at? Yeah, like see this has
yes,
small blurbs like multi-glossary.
so that's an excellent point. So I will make sure that we do add the description. Because yes, I mean, yes, you could click run the report and see what it does, but yeah, I agree, it's helpful to know in advance.
Yeah.
All right, great point. All right.
On your bulletins, is like your bulletins and not your bulletin list?
Oh my God.
Do it again. That's a question.
Sorry, I was like,
Yes, fine. Is it logging off?
it's saying that there's more software updates, but I'm going to fight it.
Oh.
Remind me.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, welcome back. Okay. We have a double screen thing going. So where we left off before we were so rudely cut off by our software updates, in that field dictionary. So you can take a look at what the definition is. If we as a community agree that if we need new options added for a particular field or a particular dropdown, we can go and add something. We can decide as a community to change the actual definition of a specific field. So you won't be able to technically edit or trash them when you're in your actual account, but they will be accessible. And finally, the last drop-down menu option at that top of that screen, you have the option to go and change your password. And it's a little bit different in terms of HIFIS 3. You could obviously change your password. It's the same thing here where it's really just, you only have to type in 6 characters. It's not super fancy. It's not complex. You don't have to have an uppercase, a lowercase, a symbol, your firstborn child, the color of your eyeballs, whatever. And it will last for, I think we have it set at 365 days. So you technically could go and change your password today to something, and then 5 minutes later, change it back to your old one, and that's okay with our system, apparently. And if you forget your password, from that front login page, when you first log in, you're actually going to be asked kind of a memorable phrase. And that's a unique thing. So when you are asking for your password to be changed, there's technically 2 options. You can email or contact Steve and I, and we'll do that for you. Or you can just say, I forgot my password, and the email that's kind of associated with your user account, as long as you kind of type in your little memorable phrase and your username, it will email you yourself at any time of day or night, and it bypasses us completely. So that'll be handy and much more user-friendly. So any questions about those drop-down things? No? Didn't think so. Again, if I click on that kind of the HIFIS title, it just brings you back to that main front screen. So to answer Heather's earlier question about how do you change to a different service provider within your list of service providers. So if you go and hover over where it says the active shelter that you were logged into in that top right corner of the screen, right now for me it says shelter A, and if I click on that, it gives me that kind of login option again. Sadly, I do need to type in my password again, but I can go and select whichever other shelter that I want to log into instead. So that particular one, we understand that that's probably going to be the biggest change right now for people to get used to, especially in the family shelter system where they have, not just the 2 Carling and Forward family shelters, but they have over 24 separate, motels that are used as overflow. We understand that it's going to be a bit of a difference in process. We are trying to work with ESDC right now, who do the coding of this program, to see what kind of solutions we can make. So it's, instead of having to kind of, if you're on the phone and you're placing people in different locations, that's, there's got to be a different way for us to be able to kind of have multiple ones tied to like one user instead of having to log into all the different ones. So that might still be resolved by the 21st. Not holding my breath, I guess. I'm a little doubtful. So we're going to proceed as if this is kind of the system and it's the way it is. So it's just, if you work with different clients within different, shelter programs at your agency, at best, if you can try and say today, or at least right now for the next, 2 clients, I'm working with, the, Lighthouse. And then all of a sudden now I'm working in stabilization or whatever. If you're able to do that, great. And if you have to kind of jump back and forth for clients, that's okay too. But if it becomes the bane of your existence, or we want to know your experience with this, because you're the ones who will have to use this every day. So if you're using this and it's, yes, it's going to be something different to get used to in terms of just a new system. But if it makes you want to eat shards of broken glass, we really want to hear about it. Or if you're like, this is actually not too bad and, it's not a big deal at all, and I don't want to stab a voodoo doll with your face on it, then I also want to hear that, please. Okay, one thing I can't show you because we're logged in here all properly. If you log in 3 times incorrectly, your account will technically be locked. In that case, you will need to email Steve or I, because we will need to go and unlock your account. Oh, sorry, not 3 times, 5 times. I'm a liar, liar, pants on fire. So you have 5 times to kind of get it right. You can use that forgot password option. You can reset it. So just be aware of that. Otherwise, you have to wait for us to do the unlocking. All right, moving right along. Oh, that was the other thing. The buttons that you'll see on the side of any of the lists that show up. So depending on what module you're on, you're going to see, it's all in a list that you're seeing at first. So depending on which module you're selecting, you're going to see different fields. So there are different icons that are in that very right-hand side action column. So again, if you hover over any of the icons with your mouse, it's going to tell you what that particular one does. So in the document that I will send you, that's 50 giant pages, it will show you that, this one that looks like a picture frame always means display, regardless of where you are and anywhere in HIFIS. And obviously the pencil, you're used to that already, means edit. If somebody is booked in and you want to book them out, you can do that. The other thing is right now it's defaulting to showing 10 entries in a list, and I can go and change that to 25, 50, or 100 if I want to do that. And again, I can go and filter items by, again, searching for a name or just this past week or whatnot. In the submissions tab, you'll see that there's three tabs. So almost on any page in HIFIS, you kind of have to take a look around what's on the page. There's always going to be this little I information or get help button in the top corner of pretty much any module. It's going to tell you a little bit more about, what this particular module does, and it'll give you some options for, if you want to just jump to step-by-step how to book in a family, then it will take you there. There's also, again, different tabs at the top of that list depending on where you're at. So the reservations we're not going to touch because we're working in the homelessness field. We are not a motel. Well, there's some motels, but I digress. Bed availability. I'm not 100% sure at this point. There's going to be some points where I'm going to tell you that, unlike in HIFIS 3.8, where I live, breathe, sleep HIFIS, I can tell you an answer for every little dark corner of it. There are going to be some things where I'm not 100% sure, but I will promise to get you the answers. So in this particular one, it's showing bed availability. So technically, what that's intending is for all of our agencies to technically be able to look at, you won't see the client lists or, technically who's booked into which particular beds, but you would be able to see that, oh, look, this demo organization has 49 available beds. So if a client came or was on the phone with me, it might not be, hopefully we're trying to enter data in as real time as possible, but even if we're not, we at least kind of have an idea, ballpark idea of if there might be any availability within our own capacity. So I'm hoping that we might be able to go ahead with this module being active, but we will have to see if some people have some strong opinions against that. So that is there anyway. So you can technically see what it is. You can refresh it so that way, you could sit there for like an hour if you wanted. How many beds is there? How many people are booking into whichever shelters? That's okay. So on this admissions list, the first thing that shows up is all the booked in clients. So again, I'm just going to default it to seeing the largest amount of entries. And any of the columns that have that kind of, looks like a little, to me, I know it's supposed to be an up arrow and a down arrow, but it is technically, to me, looks like a diamond. You can sort by any of these things. So I can, reverse sort, ascending or descending, depending on, if I want to see their name or the date that they booked in or which particular bed that they're in. And again, you can filter if you are looking for one specific client instead of having to look at a giant list or a small list, you can go right to that person. So from this screen is also where you would go and add a book-in. So there is an express book-in option, which will be turned off because the idea of that is, you're essentially clicking one button and HIFIS will pick the bed for you. It's just going to pick the next available bed in kind of the line of beds. And we obviously want folks at the shelters to decide where the people are actually going to be in. So that will be disabled. So just so you know that won't be there. The manage rooms and beds, if you click on that, this kind of brings up that kind of graphical booking page that was in HIFIS 3.8. Or at least, if you needed to switch people from one room to another room or from one bed to another bed, you can do that. Right now, it's like giant icons. So in that top left corner of this screen that's popped up, you can change your view from small icons to large icons. You can also click on the little gear, the settings, manage room button attached to every room. So if you needed to, all of a sudden you needed to add another bed to it because there's not enough beds in the room, or you needed to put in an extra one for overflow or whatever, you can do that. Hold on, to get out of that one. Aside from that, it will show you the people who are, or sorry, it'll just show you at least the beds that are in here. And the one thing that is cool with most of the modules within HIFIS, or at least when you're in an active kind of tool, if you kind of just shift your mouse over to the very left of the screen, you'll see that this kind of control panel pops up. So at least for these beds, it's, again, I can search for a specific client if I, can't remember what bed that they're in because maybe I'm looking at, small icons as opposed to big icons or whatever. And the different colors of the beds will tell you if it's occupied, if it's unoccupied, if it's been technically reserved, if it's an overflow bed, etc., etc. So that's always kind of there hiding on the side. But going back to just admissions. So booking a client in, this is kind of similar to your reception menu in a sense, in a much more scaled down sense. So if you're booking somebody in, you're clicking that add book in button at the bottom left of that screen, and it will ask you for a client's name. So if I start typing in, it will give me an option to, I don't know if you saw that. Let me try. I'm going to do that again. So as I'm typing in a client's name, I have to type in at least 3 characters. So I'm typing in, let's click in the field, SMI, because I want Frank G. Smith. And if I go and click on that person, if they are already attached to a family, an existing family unit within HIFIS, then all of a sudden you'll get this secondary button that pops up saying, do you want to book in the whole family? So, do you actually want to, actually, I'm going to pause and skip to this screen that we're seeing. So this is an attestation screen. If for the folks who have not or are through the webinar, on occasion, depending on a client that you select, you may get the screen that pops up saying, attestation, you must attest that you're actually serving this client, that you're not just randomly searching for client names, or you're not looking for your neighbor who is in a shelter, or, somebody that you know of that you worked with 4 years ago or something. That it's not going to stop you from doing that. It's just kind of a check-in to make sure that, are you sure you really need to be working with these folks? And yes, I do. So I'm going to make sure that it says yes for both of those clients. And if there was 7 members of the family, you'd have to do that for the 7 people. Once you do it once, then you won't have to do that again.
Even if you're just booking one person? Oh no, we're booking the family.
Yeah, no, but actually it would be for even the one person. That if you have not worked with that client before, or if you have no, record of having entered anything about that client before, HIFIS, again, there's a very detailed user activity log. So if it sees that Hélène has never had any dealings with Mike LeBlanc Mike, then it's just going to pop up and say, you're a new user or new shelter staff for this client. Are you sure it's the right person? Should you be touching this file? Kind of thing. So if they are part of a family and you select that you want to book in the whole family, easy peasy, all the members would be in here. If you just want the one, you just go with the one name that you typed in and move on. So just like in HIFIS 3, it defaults to today's current date and time. So it's really important to make sure that we're entering the time that the client or the family actually arrived. The expected book out date, we're going to gray that out kind of like it is now, because you never know how long someone's going to stay for. It's not like a hotel system. The reason for service, same thing like we have right now. You can start typing and it will kind of scroll down the list, or you can use the scroll bar at the right and pick whichever one that makes the most sense, or what's the most primary reason for them to come. The other big difference for here is now we have to technically assign a program. So for anybody who has not done billing, for every single client who books into a shelter, they need to have some sort of per diem funding program attached to each of their stays in order for them to even appear on the billing report. So it can be, a city per diem program, it can be a CAS per diem program, it can be they're paying privately, it can be whatever. Most agencies, their kind of standard one is kind of the city, regular per diem funding. And in HIFIS 3, we used to have, we could either do that manually for the clients who needed it, just the folks who were doing the billing, or we kind of had this magic tool in the background where you can kind of apply the same per diem program to everybody who stayed in a particular period. We don't have that option anymore, and this is actually going to be a lot easier because in HIFIS 3, the programs module was in a whole different area. And now it's part of the stay. So you are forced to pick a particular program. So the plus and minus on any HIFIS thing means that it is, you're picking all of them or you're picking none of them. For this particular shelter that they're booking into, the only funding program that's available is called Goldilocks. Who knew?
How come it's not marked a mandatory field?
It will be.
Okay.
Yes. Because yes, if a client doesn't appear if they don't have a program attached to them, like we really need that to happen. So we will be setting that as mandatory. And depending on your agency, it might only just show only one, just per diem program. But there are some, YSB and St. Mary's, because they have youth and there's different funding streams. St. Mary's has like 18, okay, maybe not 18, but there's different options to pick from to make sure that they appear on the right one. There's also, when you're booking a client in, do they require any evacuation assistance? So that's a new thing. So we used to just ask, do they have any physical disabilities or medical conditions we need to be aware of? So if somebody does in fact need assistance with getting out of the building, you can click that. Again, a lot of these next ones are optional if they've been referred from a particular place by a particular staff, if they need a late pass or wake up time, if they've arrived for intake and they are intoxicated at that time. If you want to enter any comments that are relevant to their booking in, then you would click next. So right now, again, I have this. I'm going back to the small icons version instead of the large icons. And just like in HIFIS 3, the people that you want to book in are always going to be kind of at the top in that kind of deck area. And again, remembering that if you kind of scroll over to the left, that control panel will pop up. So just like in HIFIS 3, except you don't necessarily need to click and drag. I can literally click. And when I have a person selected, the color of the box that they're in goes from blue to orange. And then I can pick whichever bed I want to put them in. So I want to put them in there. And I know that it's saved correctly because the bed turned green. So it's just a really quick visual for me that, okay, everything is saved properly. Same with this next person. However many people are in the family, you would do the same thing. So when you have entered that information, you can, save. You can go back if all of a sudden if there was mistakes that were made, and they will now be added to this kind of book-in list. So obviously those are for existing clients. The book out, same, just at least to show the book out that you would find them in the list and click on that book out button. And whoop. And same thing like in HIFIS 3, what date and time did they actually leave, not necessarily when you're doing the data entry. What's their main reason for discharge? And we have actually adjusted the reason for service and the reason for discharge a little bit to kind of make it more geared to, hopefully people aren't just regularly using whereabouts unknown or transient lifestyle over and over and over and over and over. Like, we're trying to really drill down to the main reasons why people are leaving or coming and going. Sometimes you do have to use whereabouts unknown or they went to another shelter, but we're hoping that people can try and be as specific as possible. If they have been referred to a specific place, you can go and add that. If, for example, they went to the hospital, you can go and put a comment saying they went to this particular hospital, not this other one. And then when you book them out, again, it will show up saying, processing, please wait, and then they're gone. And you'll notice if you look really quickly in the top right corner, it says data saved. So lots of places in HIFIS, there is a technical save button, in which case you will see that green kind of yay data saved box that kind of appears really quickly in the right corner. There are some areas that auto save. So just, keep an eye out that if all of a sudden you're entering information, you don't see a save icon, hopefully you at least kind of see that data saved thing. If you don't, or if all of a sudden you see data not saved and it's a big red box instead of the green one, then your data has not been saved. So make sure you have everything filled out, all the mandatory fields. Yes, and that will go away once I kind of hover away from it. Questions on booking in, booking out? Easy peasy.
My screen is frozen.
Me too.
Hit F5 to refresh. See if that.
All of Google Chrome is frozen. Can't even shut it down. Should have been extra, folks.
Okay. Did F5 refresh things properly? No. Does your computer require software updates? Do we have any webinar questions, Kale? Good. Excellent.
The whole computer. No, it's just normal. So that's the start.
We are pausing momentarily to fix some technical glitches our in-person folks are having. See, this is the universe saying, don't look at your screen, look at my screen.
That's what I'm doing.
Or something.
It's much easier.
Okay, let me know when y'all are back. Y'all.
I'm back.
Hooray. All good?
Save the day.
Tremendous. All right. Okay.
Wait, no.
Nope.
Yeah, I just put in my client name and then.
Here, pausing for 10 more seconds. Does someone have a fun story to tell?
Reach out to your webinar.
Reach out to my webinar people. Hello, webinar people.
I believe Jennifer's one.
Hello, Jennifer.
Dina as well. Oh, she's tomorrow.
Jennifer, do you hate me? Is that why you're not here in person? Someone's computer just fell. That was Steve. That must be Jennifer jumping through the computer saying, yes, I'm glad I am not there. Joking, Jennifer, I love you. You're Frozen. Someone want to sing Let It Go from Frozen? I do not. Okay, if you get in, just go back and click on the HIFIS title logo thing to bring you back to kind of, well, it'll show bulletins, but at least we're all starting from the same place. Okay, excellent. So next, I probably should have started with this. Before booking clients in, you might want to find a client first. So again, that client search field in the top, again, you can enter information in or type in text, or if you just leave it blank and you hit the enter tab or the magnifying glass search tab, it's going to bring up all the clients. So it's just a really quick step. And like the other option is to go to this front desk drop-down menu and then go to clients. And it's the same process. It just, doing it through the search field kind of saves you a click. So you're welcome. You're a professional now. You'll also notice that you can filter these clients in this list that's showing up, all the clients, from just, all clients or only the active clients or inactive. If you want to see a list of only deceased clients, you can do that. So depending on who you have in your list, again, you can, if I'm scrolling all the way down because I've now defaulted to showing 100 different ones, you'll notice again all these same columns. The home icon that's in that last right-hand side action column means go to the admission page where you can proceed to technically book them in or book them out. If they have an eyeball icon next to their name in that action column, that means that there's some sort of active watch concern. So they might be, we're no longer using the term barred, we're using the term service restriction. So, or, Some people use ineligible or temporarily denied access. So whatever term that you use, it might be that they have a bulletin. They might have some sort of, they set fire to the building yesterday. It could be that they are on a service restriction, and that will give you a quick link to viewing the information there. So from here, I can look at a list of my active clients. Again, if I want to look for a specific one, then I would go to that client search field in that top left corner, or top right corner, sorry, and look for them. If somebody is deceased or inactive, you will see in their name that it will actually have that particular status in brackets next to their name. So adding a client, you'll notice that the screen is split in two. So you're entering the information on the right-hand side. The first thing, and we're going to actually talk about this for 5 seconds here, is consent type. So some of you were not at the meeting that we had, about a week and a half ago to kind of talk about some of these changes. So we know that shelter clients sign kind of that, shelter resident consent form every time they come in, or once a month, or however often that they sign it, depends on your agency. But that they do sign a consent saying that they're agreeing to receive services, that their information will be inputted into this and technically shared with, the city and with other service providers, blah, 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 blah. That we are actually going to be combining kind of the regular shelter consent with the SPDAT consent as well. So that way there'll only be one for the clients to sign. And really it's just asking, have they consented to them being in here? You can kind of look up the specific things for what does that mean in terms of the different options. So we're going to take out some of these options. So we have explicit, means they are giving, their explicit consent for us to, share their information, like in our whole system, kind of, the coordinated access housing first way that we're meant to do that they technically declined, that, it's inherited, that they signed consent before, but we're just, it's being carried over. So, or the inherited, sorry, that I take that back. That's for children who, someone else, whether it's a parent or a guardian or like a CAS worker who has given consent on a child's behalf. So that's inherited. The consent to share, but not, report information and others. So you're really going to have explicit and you're going to have inherited. If somebody doesn't give consent, you will have no information to put in there. Yes?
If the client's already been in another shelters coming to mind, I see that, do I still need to do a new consent?
No.
So it's already consented for life?
Yes, and they'll actually have, so if I go and pick, I'm just picking explicit just because it was top of the list and I'm super lazy, it will automatically default to today's date as being the start date. And you can technically go and pick that, as long as somebody in the system, because hopefully we're all signing kind of the same consent form across the board, that normally we would have them expire in a year. That's kind of a typical consent form. But if your particular agency only has 6 months, or maybe it's a separate kind of consent, then you can go and enter whatever date that you want. So I'm just gonna, whichever. You can actually even upload a scanned copy of the consent form if you want it. So that's pretty cool. And you can store actually any kind of document. I'm very excited about this possibility. So after you kind of fill out that consent thing, and that will appear at the top. So if for some reason you're going to access a client file, just kind of jumping ahead, and their consent has technically lapsed, or it's kind of past that expiry date, it's not to say that now you can't access their information. It's just going to kind of pop up saying it's kind of past their expiry date, and you can kind of click, extend, or enter a new date. But even if they have not consented, you would still technically have access to seeing it. It will just continue to kind of pop up until you do something about that consent and update it. So if I go and fill out if I'm pretending to enter a new client, it's going to, as I'm typing information in, either last name, first name, middle name, or alias, and I'm going to actually get rid of the last name and as I'm typing, you'll see on the right-hand side, it's going to automatically pop up with other people who have the same kind of last name, first name, middle name, date of birth, whatever. And it gives you a chance before you even like keep filling out all the information that maybe the client already exists, in which case then you can just go and click on that client's name who pops up. So if all of a sudden I'm actually trying to access Alice, Timmy, Cooper, I can go and like click on their name instead and then proceed with booking them in or adding more client details. Or if that's not the person, then I would continue entering the data on the left-hand side to go and create my new client. I think all of our agencies work with clients where you do know the birth date. So there is the option about if you don't know their birth date, you can technically go and put an approximate age. So that's always technically an option. But otherwise, it's just, you know, here is their, you know, year, month, day, and if the information is verified. So it's one thing for them, especially for, you know, anybody who might be doing placements really quickly over the phone, or you're creating information based on, you know, they're just showing up and you're not seeing ID. So if you have not seen ID, or they have not personally verified that this is how they spell their name and their actual date of birth, then you'll leave that set as no. Otherwise, you'll go, yes, I totally verified their information. Their gender is whatever they self-identify as. So there's lots of different options here. And you're also able to indicate if they have a physical disability, if they have any medical or bracelet or issues. There's also this option, you'll see a client is visible, and I can go and pick hidden or visible through that little toggle thing. So every now and then we'll have clients who, it's like, gosh, I think it's been very, very rare in my era of HIFIS usage where somebody is, for example, fleeing abuse from somebody who actually works at a shelter who might have access to HIFIS. Then perhaps they don't want their name kind of floating around in there. So you would have the option to go and select that their file be hidden and would only be accessible by their caseworker and an administrator. So that's always an option. So they would still show up on, you know, a billing report. Their name might not be published, but if you don't have rights to kind of seeing that particular client, they won't even appear in your search list. You won't be able to find them. There's that. Again, same as HIFIS 3, there's the veteran status, client citizenship, immigration status, and Aboriginal status, which should be Indigenous status. That is mandatory. The geographic region, same thing, refers to where was the client staying or what area were they staying in immediately before coming to our shelter. The file number, I believe we're going to turn that off as well, because we don't kind of have a centralized, you know, HIFIS user number or file number. If you happen to know, or if they're able to share what their country of birth is and it's not Canada, you'll notice that it will pop up with, you know, I picked United States as the country of birth, and now it gives me the options for which particular state or city, and I can go and enter that. So once I enter all those pieces of information in here. At the bottom, you have a few different options. You can just save the record. You can save and immediately kind of go to that admissions book-in screen to like go ahead and book your client into whatever bed. Or if they are a family, if they are a brand new person and they're going to be a member of a family, you can say save and start family, which turns them from a single to a family head. And then you can go ahead and add folks. You look.
Mine doesn't have that.
That's a great question. I think it might also depend on the birth date that you have.
Oh, right. Born yesterday.
Yeah, if they were born yesterday, or if they are under 12 years old, I think it is. Sadly, you can only be a family head if you are older than 12. So I'm just going to go ahead and just plain old save. Once I do that, then it brings up the kind of client's vitals information form. So this is where this is kind of like the client details that was in HIFIS 3. So you'll notice that this particular page has everything you want to know about the client. There are different tabs for the different pieces of information, but there's also, more importantly, above the not a picture, the blank image, pretend you know what they look like, picture there, which you can add, by the way. There's 2 drop-down menus. One's client information, and that has to do with any information relating to a client that's not necessarily tied to the stay or, tied to the transaction at the time. So it's something about, the actual client themselves rather than the services you're providing. Whereas the client management screen is all about the services you'll provide to the client. So whether that's admissions or incidences or case management or housing. So services you're providing to the client or transactions that you want to record as opposed to information about the actual client themselves. So really service related versus not service related. And again, there's so many different ways to get to a lot of these pages. So, case management or clients, you can kind of get to from searching. You can get it from the front desk. You can get it from wherever. So just be aware that, like, oh, wow, I see housing placements here, but it's also in a different area that I came across or whatever. But that's really just to make it as convenient as possible for you. So there's no one right way or wrong way. But for this particular client, you'll notice that it has under their non-picture, their fake image, it has even what their consent status is. So you'll be able to see right away, if their consent is actually active. It even will say that they are currently not booked in. And then all the tab information on that client vitals screen, kind of on the right-hand side, has everything you could ever want to know about the person. The cool thing that it does here is it displays the history. So in HIFIS 3 right now, there's nothing stopping, Levon from going and changing the spelling of somebody's name or correcting their date of birth. And I will see who created the file, but I won't necessarily see all the iterations of any changes. Once, you make kind of those changes and then I go and I change their, Aboriginal status or their geographic region, it's not going to show you the in-between people. It'll show you the first person, it'll show you the last person who made changes. So this display vitals history is really great for you to be able to go and say, wait a minute, I know I kind of added an ID number or, whatever for this particular client, and now it's different, and you'll be able to see who possibly made that change so you can touch base. You can also go and click on that edit button to change whatever information that you want. If I kind of go through some of those tabs, and again, you don't have to fill out information in every single one of them, just like HIFIS 3. So there's contact information with a, add contact information here. So if they have a cell phone, if they have an email they want to share, if they have an emergency contact number, you can go and add whatever means of contact that they would prefer. And it should be really, anything that's specific to the client, not necessarily that here's my old phone number that I lived at that I will never live at because that was with my parents and now I don't, whatever. And you can have more than one record in there. Physical appearance, like in HIFIS 3, you technically could go and enter information into here about their height, their weight, those kind of things, distinguishing features. You can add more than one now, unlike HIFIS 3 where you had to pick just kind of the top one. And here's also where you can technically edit the profile picture or add a profile picture. Yep.
Just in contact info.
Okay, let me get back up there. Okay.
Add contact information. What's value? Is that required field?
Yes, it depends on which one you select. So for example, home phone, it's going to make me enter a phone number in there. If I were to go and say that it's an email instead, it knows it's just a field type. So it knows to not expect a 10-digit phone number. It knows to expect other text. So the value really should be, contact number or contact email or.
If you incorrectly, it should validate. So if it says email there, you start typing in a phone number, you should see an error saying no.
So yes, I'm trying to type in letters when I have the means of communication selected as work phone, and it doesn't let me type in anything. It's only when I type in numbers that it will finally let me.
Select email.
Oh, whoops. Okay, email.
Type in a phone number.
Do. And it's like we're keeping track of that because it doesn't necessarily know. You can have numbers as part of an email address, but you know it should have a at symbol and a dot something.
That's miss on there.
Yes, which we're gonna make a little note of that.
And so these are the types of things that even if, not yet, when we go live, these are the types of things that if you kind of have, send us a quick email because we don't necessarily go into all of these functions every day, right? So these are the types of things that we may not catch as quickly as we folks would to using. So let us know, these are the types of things we have to know before and after we go live.
All right. So physical appearance. Here again, you can technically add a profile picture, whether that be webcam screenshot or uploading a actual digital picture of them. That's always an option. The languages tab. Instead of in HIFIS 3 where we kind of have primary language, do they speak English or French? What other languages do they speak? Everything is just here, like what are the languages? Content failed to load 0. I'm refreshing. There we go. And aha. Sometimes if you get some sort of wonky thing happening on your screen, if you hit the F5 button on your keyboard to refresh your screen, sometimes it fixes it by itself, and sometimes it does not. Good luck. So the language, you can pick again. You can add multiple languages. If a client speaks 7 languages, you can go and add all the 7 ones. And then you're really picking one, like if they could have language in any service of their choosing, what would they have? Not necessarily that we provide service in English or French, but yes, they might speak English, but maybe they prefer to have service if they ideally in Swahili, whichever. So all the languages that you pick would be listed in there. The comments and the custom tables won't technically have a tab because we're going to turn that off because there's nothing custom-y, table-y for us to collect information about right now. Comments, it's really, if there's any comment that kind of comes out of the intake or that's important for other folks to know that's not collected anywhere else, you would put that there. But overall, you're really going to just enter information into those other tabs, in the mandatory ones, and there you go. The difference actually between looking at any of these modules from the client information or the client management screens or the front desk, whichever, the difference will be if it's a general list of all the clients. Like, for example, if I went to housing placements through the front desk, it's going to show me all the housing placements for all the clients. If I'm on this one particular client and I clicked on housing history, it's only going to show me the housing history for that client. So just be aware that the lists in your client profile are attached to the client, if that makes sense. And similar to HIFIS 3, if there's additional information, whether it's about health information, if they have a vehicle, if you want to kind of delve into what type of veteran they are, or enter any other contact information, upload copies of ID or documents or housing applications, whatever, you can go and do that through these chunks. And same thing, you can decide to jump to any of the actual transactional things or the services that you would provide by going to that client management screen, and it would automatically populate the client's name in there if you're going kind of through this method. In terms of adding a family, or at least the folks who deal with families, so I've created this one brand new client. So kind of similar to what happens at St. Mary's very frequently. They come in and they're always a single person. And then by the time they leave, they're almost always not a single person. They are a family. So if that changes, again, the way HIFIS 4 kind of configures families is different than in HIFIS 3. So it used to be, well, still is in HIFIS 3, but if you were a family, you were joined forever and ever and ever, and it's the same families unless you actually, intentionally go and remove a family member or add or make those adjustments. In HIFIS 4, it's a little bit more fluid. So you could kind of have a family, and some people might book in and some people might not. Or if you're the only person booking in, it will recognize you as being there as a single person as opposed to with your partner and your children or whatnot. So your status in terms of the state could change over time. So it's, if somebody, we often have, a family will come with 2 parents and, 3 kids, and then all of a sudden, 15 years later, one of the kids ends up staying in a shelter by themselves. So really, you would technically pull them out of the family, but you don't need to with HIFIS 4 now. It just recognizes that they used to be part of this other family. And it maintains that kind of history, which is really helpful. But if I wanted to go and change this person into a family unit of some kind, I would go and click that client information button to go to family, since they already exist and I'm not creating it brand new at the time. And I would either select that I want to start a new family, so that would change their family status from a single person to a family head, or I can say I want them to join an existing family. So, for example, in St. Mary's, the best process for you folks would technically be to still take the mom and turn her into a family head, and you would still have to make each new client separately anyway. And then for the baby, then you can just go and say, join an existing family.
I won't have to take the mother out to book her back in and make her the head, because that's what I have to do now.
Yeah.
I don't have to book her out anymore.
Well, because you still have the 2 programs, yes. That's not a me thing, though. If you can convince your powers that be that one shelter is good, and it just depends on their family status, fill your boots.
Yeah, we have the prenatal and postnatal.
So, and that's totally different from their actual family status. So if there is technically 2 shelters for, I had my baby versus I did not have my baby yet, then that's sadly different.
We're causing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you had 1 shelter, exactly, you wouldn't have to book them out, book them back in, whatever. For sure. But anyway, if you needed to start them as a family or join an existing family, I click the start a family, and you'll see that with this client kind of family screen that pops up, it has the person's name that I've selected, and it already has changed their family role to family head. So I can go, and the 2 options that I have are to add a member, or, whoops, I'm going to close that. Or you can create and add a member. So adding a member is finding somebody who already exists in the database that you've already created, doesn't matter when, and slap them into this family. But, if, for example, at St. Mary's, when a young woman has just had their baby today, chances are don't exist in HIFIS already. So this gives you the option to go and create a brand new person and then add them to the family. So a couple fewer steps. So if I am just adding a member, if they already exist, again, I can just start typing the name of the person who might already exist. And, oh, the client I selected is not eligible to join another family based on their current record, so they're attached to another family already. Fine. Let's try this person, Scooby-Doo. And you can decide what their family role is. In HIFIS 3, any new member that you created automatically defaulted to becoming a dependent child, even if it was a partner, even if they were 85 years old. Now you'll get to pick whether they're the partner, child, extended family, roommate, etc., etc. And it's asking for a start date. So when did that relationship start? It's going to default to today, and it's okay to leave it at that, unless you know that, oh, they have been in these partners have been in a relationship for the last 7 months and 4 days and 3 hours. Go ahead and change it to whatever. But I think an easy workaround, just to leave it as today's date. Totally fine. That being said, if, for example, going back to the example where a youth that's kind of been placed with their family a long time ago, and now they're being placed as a, independent person, adult themselves. You could go and, when you're removing them from the family, you could go and enter an end date that as of today, they're no longer part of that regular family because now they're on their own. Oh, sorry, and you also have to enter what their relationship to their family head is. So it will have all of the members that you have added. You can add as many as you want. You just have to follow those same steps. And you can go and edit their information. Content failed to load again. Okay, F5 is my friend. Refresh. No, it's not. I am a liar. You should be able to click edit. Okay, we are making note of this technical boo-boo. So you should be able to go and say, actually, that's not the family head. It's now this other person, just because that's kind of how it works. Or it's not an aunt, it's now their cousin, or it's, whatever. You should be able to go and technically change that there. So
I was able to do it.
You are a superstar, and I'm really jealous. I don't know what you're doing, but yay.
Was anybody else?
Okay, fine. Okay, all right. Whatever. I know HIFIS, all the wells. I know all the HIFISes. So yeah, with the family, just like in HIFIS 3, again, you can go ahead and you can book them in together. You can book 3 out of 5 members of a family in. You can book 1 member in. You can remove them from a family. They're configured differently. So whatever you need to do, again, you can look at the history. So above in this client kind of family button or page, near kind of the top right of that main screen, there's a family history button. So you'd be able to kind of see all the different times that someone might have been removed from her family or added kind of over all those iterations. So again, very helpful. So you can go and see, oh, wait a minute, they were placed before with their boyfriend at the time, and it'll show you that person's name or what the relationship was. So very cool. All right, so that's families. Housing history, which again, I can create through this client, or I can kind of go through the front desk through housing. And go to that I want to add housing history. So you'll see that there's technically 2 tabs in this client housing history. There's this main housing history tab, but there's also technically a risk of homelessness, which I don't think is necessarily of super helpfulness, because it's really asking you to identify, are they at high risk? Are they, what's their kind of acuity for losing homelessness? And that doesn't really change the services that we're providing to that client based on their risk level, at least just for regular placement. So we're really going to focus on that housing history. So when you're adding a housing record, again, you're filling in the mandatory things. You can fill in as many or as few of the items as you want. What type of housing is it? And again, if they had been staying in a shelter or a different shelter for the last, 6 months, you can still go and put, even though it wasn't their permanent address, you can still go and at least indicate that it was their address. So again, it will default the start date for always being today. So you might want to change that, and it doesn't have to be exact. If they say, I lived with my friend for the last 3 months, you can just kind of what's 3 months ago and, kind of estimate when you need to. The place name is really used for, if a building has a name, like the Meadows or whatever. Oh, actually, on this page, like many other pages, in the top right corner, there is a question mark button where it says Enable Field Descriptions. So when I click on that, next to almost all of the fields, it'll have now a question mark icon. So if I go and click on place name, that's really not helpful. It tells you what the definition is, the name of the place, but it's really supposed to be like building name or whatever, or unit apartment number. Differentiates multiple units or apartments at the same address, usually with a number or letter. That's a little more helpful. So just if you're not sure, there's a lot of screens that have the option to enable the field descriptions. So you can go and enter information in here. You can even go so far as to enter what the amount of rent that they were paying. And again, contact information for that particular unit. Once you add any information here, we'll also add it to that kind of contact information section. So they're kind of linked. So you enter it once here, it also shows up in, that client profile. Same thing with any documents. If you add a document attached to case management, it shows up in the regular document list too. So a little bit more integrated. Questions so far? I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself here. Oh, adding shelter contributions. That is helpful. So again, from the client profile, doesn't matter which page you happen to be on at the time, if a client is staying with you and they pay some sort of contribution towards their stay, you would need to add it to kind of the program section. So when you book them in, you technically added a per diem program to their stay. So if I wanted to go and enter that they gave money towards their stay, I would go and look at their program list, which they don't have one, because apparently I forgot to give it to them. Oops, missions. Oh, I did not book them in, that's why. Hold on, let's go find somebody who has. Okay. Oops, asking about consent. And I'm not entering end date. I'm not entering a attachment. So to enter a payment or program, you're actually technically going in almost looking, it looks like you're editing their stay. So you're finding them in that admissions list, or you're going to their client profile and you're finding the admissions or the book-in. And up top, once you get to that kind of edit stay page, there will be a programs button in the top right-ish corner. So if I click on that, it gives me the option. This particular Homer Simpson that I picked does not have a program. So I need to make sure that one is actually added. Once a program is actually added, or if it was already added and it's listed here, you'll notice you'll have a few different options in that actions column. So I can go and add a payment, or I can edit the actual program, or I can delete it. So if I want to add a payment, I would click on that kind of $sign. It brings me to kind of a payments, and this is where you would go and say that they gave me, it was trusteeship, they gave it to me today, or $5. Yes, 5. And you don't have to actually enter the decimal point. You would just keep kind of typing. So if I want 500, I just keep typing 500. Well, it would actually look like I'm typing 50,000, if that makes sense. So I have to type in all the zeros for it to actually be right amount. Webinar people, this might not make sense, but you just need to make sure that you're adding the cents as well as the dollars. If there's a receipt number that you've given to them, you can go and add that. The comments, you can say that it's rent for November 2018, and you can also indicate what the payment period is for. So it's one thing that they've given it to you for today, but perhaps the payment period was actually for last month. So you can go and specify, that the payment should be technically applied to rent at another time. So this will give you the list of all the different times that they have given you any payments. Again, you can edit that. You can delete them as needed. And that way they will be attached to your billing report, which is super fantastic. The next two things I'm going to look at before I kind of get into some case management stuff is the service restrictions, which not everybody uses that, but we're hoping that that might change. So if you do have to ask somebody to leave, again, you can maintain their history and kind of see any patterns or trends that are happening, keep those details of any meetings that you've had. So the service restriction list, because again, usually you go to a module and it kind of pops up with an initial list. It gives me the option to view all the people who have service restrictions or just the current ones, and you can also filter for what period of time. So, you know, I want to see the ones that have been asked to leave in the last 1 week or 2 weeks or the last year or everybody. I'm going to default to all. And again, you can filter items, you can search for a specific client or whatnot. So this will at least give you a quick list of the clients who are asked to leave. If they've been restricted from receiving services at more than one shelter or service provider, it's going to tell you that they've been asked to leave from 12 service providers, and I click on the little arrow attached to the name, and it's going to tell you all of the places that they're not allowed to stay. You can also technically restrict services, not just on they can't stay here, but you can say that, you know, they can't stay here, but we will give them food at a food bank, or we will give, you know, meet with them for case management, or maybe we're going to do none of those things. So you can decide what components of service that they may or may not be able to access, again, for the same period of time. And if there's a, you know, a quick reason, if you want to view more details about that, you would click, just like in HIFIS 3, on kind of the display, and it will bring you to, ooh, I'm getting it. This site can't be reached, but we're good now. Okay, so it brings up the display service restrictions list, and it's going to tell you the main comment about why that particular client was asked to leave, and again, which agencies that applies to. You can go and edit a comment, or, you know, edit the comment section to add an additional comment instead of adding a separate record, to at least say that, you know, maybe they came in and they met with us 2 weeks later and we talked about their eligibility and blah, 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 blah. You can go and do that. Or you can go and edit it, or you can, you know, add a new service restriction. And again, you're filling out the mandatory pieces and saving. I'm not going to bother doing that. But that is there. So again, you'll notice that in the service restrictions section, it's asking for, you know, the start date and an end time. So for example, it's saying that the end date and time for this particular service restriction is, well, technically today it's 7:44 a.m., which is in the past. So at 7:45 a.m., if you looked on the service restriction screen, they would no longer be listed as having a current restriction. So they would be able to access all the services again at that time. So you could go and edit and extend that or shorten it depending on what's happening with that client. And moving on to turnaways, which diversions, turnaways, whatever you want to call them, very similar to what's in HIFIS 3 already. Again, you can filter the viewing of, do you want to see all of them or just the ones for the last week or the last month, however much that you want. And you can view the details or edit the details of that. And just technically, well, like in HIFIS 3, you have the option to technically create an anonymous turnaway. So there used to technically be a built-in anonymous client that was always the top of the list, anonymous, comma, anonymous, or and now we don't have kind of that client built in. It's just there's options to add a turnaway or add an anonymous turnaway. So if you have the name of a client, or, you know, multiple clients, if they're a family, you can select that. But if you're not, if you don't have the person's name and you have to turn them away, it just presents the same information, but it just doesn't have a name. So, you know, do you presume them to be Aboriginal? Do they have an observed disability? Are they a youth, an adult, a senior, their gender? And what's different actually in the turnaways for both ones with names or the anonymous ones is you can indicate how many adults and children. So if a family shows up, or if they're calling on the phone and you're not able to place them, then you can say that it was, 2 adults and, 12 children that you had to turn away. Again, if they've been referred to a certain place, if you've asked them to call back, if all the different things that you can kind of put in there. And that's actually been a big thing that we are getting lots of questions about here at the city, even about, especially our families, or how often we're using overflow motels, how often our men's shelters and our youth shelters are they at full capacity? Do they have any wiggle room to kind of help balance out some of the fullness that's at other shelters? So by us being able to track these turnaways or diversions, if you've diverted them, it's not just that they can't stay because we're full. It could be that you manage to determine that they are able to stay with their friend for the night, and they'll try again tomorrow, or they could stay for the weekend and they'll try next week. So if you're able to kind of find them a safe place, even if it's temporary, then you would still track that as a turnaway. So us being able to kind of see all the different patterns and times that they're happening in this turnaway section, or for diversion workers especially, or housing workers, then it gives us a much better picture of kind of the activity that's happening out there. All right, how y'all doing? Anybody need a break, a little walk around? You good? Not good? People need to stand up. I'm gonna have to stand up at some point, because yes. So just looking at this front desk drop-down menu, so you'll notice that there's so many different things, and I'm not going to go into every single one of these options because nobody needs that much computer training. There'll all be the options to figure out how to do any of these transactions, which you'll either already know, or you'll be able to find out from the document or from the help section. So we're really just going to focus on kind of the main ones, or ones that you're like, I really want you to go and look at blah blah blah. Then that's fine. So the only other main one I'm going to target here that we haven't looked at yet is case management, because I know especially the folks who are present, and I'm not sure about the folks who are not present, case management's kind of a big one. So this is a little bit different than in HIFIS 3, but there are many similar elements. So when you go to the case management list, kind of just from the front desk, so it's showing you a list of just here's all the active clients, as opposed to going to one client and finding out all their specific cases. It gives you the option to show that it gives you the option, first of all, to enter a target date. So if they're here and your goal with that client or with that family is to try and find them housing in the next 3 months, then you could go and enter a target date of whatever 3 months is. And you'll notice up top at this list, the case management list, it says there are 6 that are past their target date. So it gives me a quick view of whichever ones that whichever clients that I might need to follow up on. If I don't have rights to that particular shelter that they might be staying at, or the service provider that they're attached to, then you would not necessarily see the names that are attached there. And the way that the cases work, I know that the family shelter folks are more familiar with it, but every person technically has, one case that's attached to kind of one goal. So, it might be that we're working with this client right now, and it's, it could be a general goal of sorts. It could be that we're looking specifically for housing, but you could have, separate goals depending on, the agency that might be doing work, or, maybe one agency is really working with a client about, their housing application, but another one is really trying to help with anger management counseling. So you could technically have, 2 client cases with 2 separate goals open. But overall, our current folks kind of set almost general as kind of the one specific goal, because we're dealing with everything that a client is kind of presenting at the shelter. And again, if you don't use this section, we are not mandating that you use that. So I know, for example, YSB has CRMS. Are you still using that? Yes. So, they are required to enter their specific case management pieces into that. So you don't need to duplicate it in here. It's just available should you wish. So in terms of the cases, if you need to add a brand new case for a brand new person, again, it's at the bottom on the left. And again, it would need to be for a client that exists in the system already. And you can also go and add, if they do have any family members, or if they're part of a family unit, then that family members field will pop up and ask you if you also want to attach other family members to kind of their general case. So if they're part of a family and you're dealing with all the different family issues, you generally would put everybody in there. So I'm going to do that. Again, who is the assigned caseworker, and again, what their main primary goal is. So we have general at the top. You can pick any particular one that you want. If there are certain goals in here that your particular agency uses and it's not in here, we're happy to add them. Whatever works best. And the status is just, is the general file, is it open? Is it closed? Is it, was it closed successfully, as in they moved on to actual longer term housing, or goal not met and, they disappeared and you don't know where they are. And also some agencies kind of have a specific kind of time frame that if we haven't heard from a client beyond blah, 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 like 2 months, then we would definitely close their file, or that's just kind of what you do. And some people will leave it open indefinitely, and that's also okay. So you can, like I was saying, enter a target date for when you're hoping to kind of achieve that goal with that client. It's not mandatory. The program, kind of like the per diem program, I think we're going to try and grade this out, because it doesn't matter if somebody is a CAS client or a per diem client or a, whatever, to do case management. It's not going to impact the service that you're providing. So once I enter that information in here, again, it's that display case management page will show up. I could edit the information in here that I've already entered. But you'll notice that the different tabs that appear here, you won't have a custom tables tab, by the way, in the real one. So it'll really be 4 tabs, the details, which that's just what we entered for that brand new case. If there's any client alerts, so if they have an active service restriction or some sort of watch or behavioral concern, you can see that really quickly there. But all the times that you're meeting with the client or touching base is kind of, they're considered sessions as part of the case. So you're not creating a brand new case every time you meet with the client. You're creating a case once, or at least, the one main time that they are staying with you. If they come back 2 years later, new case, that's fine. But if you meet with them throughout a number of months and you meet with them 12 times, you should have 12 different sessions in there. And if there's something that's kind of, I'm using the term juicy, but if you are the main caseworker, but someone else has a really, deep kind of conversation with that client, or does some, really important work towards their goal, even if it's just that another staff happened to receive a housing offer by fax or by email or whatever, then another person could technically still go in and add a session, even though it's a different staff and it's not the official caseworker. That's okay, because it's kind of a shared load. But I can view, if there was many sessions, I could go and view all the session details. But if I'm meeting with my new client, then I would click that I'm adding a session. And I had picked progress notes as technically the overarching goal. It would generally be general, or whatever it is that you choose. And it's going to ask, like, what activity did you actually do with them? And the drop-down items that we have on our list is a little bit different than what's on this list. So in ours, we often have, just, client contact, or an intake assessment, or SPDAT, or community plan, or whichever actual activities that you're doing with the client. In this particular case, I'm going to just say that I'm doing a SPDAT assessment. And you can go and put a description if you want, a little bit more of the actual activities that you're doing. It's asking kind of the date and time, that you met with the client. And it's not mandatory, but it is actually very helpful to go and put the time that you spent on this particular activity. Because then you'll be able to kind of shoot off a report that's going to show all the work that's kind of been focused on that particular client. So you could see that, whether it's, wow, we only had to work like 10 hours to actually get this particular family housing, or we had to work 366 hours and the person is still not housed, and, they tried to, who knows. But it often is helpful to kind of see the density of the work that you're doing. Again, you're filling out those mandatory fields, who is the primary caseworker. The responsibility field means that, if there's a follow-up, whose job is it to follow up? So, did you ask the client to provide you with something? So they're supposed to come back with, a copy of their SIN card to show you, or is it a caseworker thing where you're supposed to find some information and give it to them? So if there is a follow-up to be done, it's who's supposed to be doing it. If you've referred the client to any particular agencies, and you can also indicate if the client was present or if their whole family was present. So I know some of you might be thinking, why would the client not be present? But you could go and track that, you spoke to their OW worker, to try and arrange for money for this or this or this. So the client would not be present, but you still want to at least indicate that there was work done about that client's case management goals. So then you could go and save that, and then it will have that in the list. So again, you can go and view it, you can go and edit it. If I view all session details, it's going to tell me the amount of time that I've worked on the client. And that the next documents tab, again, if you add a document one place, it will kind of show up in all the different document areas. But this is actually where I think it could be really helpful to be uploading, whether it's copies of their ID. Like, how many times have you had clients kind of come back and like, I've lost my health card, and isn't that helpful that you happen to actually know what their number is because they gave you a photocopy of it, 2 years ago or something, or actual housing applications, or service plans, or anything that you think. And it can be a Word document, it can be a PDF, it can be a JPEG, it can be like whatever.
You'd be able to print it?
Yes. So in terms of, uploading a document, it's going to ask you, where is it located? Just like anything else, you would go and pick, the location that it is, what file that you want, and then it would be listed kind of in a list of, if you had 4 different documents, it would have them all listed there. The case comments is different than the session. So anytime you're meeting with a client or doing work around that client's goals, you would typically put that in a different session. The case comments is kind of like an overall comment about, please never meet with them in room 3 because they really hate the number 3 and they get really anxious about meeting in a room that has a 3 in it. I don't know, or, something that's just kind of not necessarily part of their goal, but something that's important to be aware of for their general case or for, good working relationship with that client. So you can also create a session. I forgot to comment about that. Oh, no, I'm going to take that back. There is technically an option to add a session that has multiple goals attached. So if you have picked multiple goals as part of kind of their case, you could go and say, we worked on this and this and this and this, but not these other things. But because I only picked one goal, it's only giving me the option to add a session with one goal. Okay, SPDAT is in technically assessment. So you'll notice right now it has both SPDAT and the VAT tool, which we do not have licensing for. So in the real HIFIS, you will only have the SPDAT list. And as well, you'll notice that you can filter the list of how many people have had SPDATs done based on, you want to just look at the last week, forever and ever, however long. And there's the 2 tabs. So one that says the PI SPDAT for those initial entries, like the pre-screening triage tool, versus the full-blown SPDAT for the full assessment. So if you want to add a new one at the bottom, at the bottom, you would pick which version that you want to do. So ours will actually have any of the older versions removed. So right now I'm looking at the VI SPDAT tab, and it's giving me the option to add adult version 1, adult version 2, family 1, 2, and youth 1. So we're going to make sure we are only listing the most recent version for you to add. So you'll only be able to add adult V2, family V2, and youth V1 in there, because it's laid out slightly differently and the scoring is different depending on which one that you're selecting. But if I did want to add, whether it's, doesn't matter if it's a full SPDAT or the VI SPDAT, if I were to go and click that I do want to add a new assessment in here, it opens up that intake display screen, and I would fill out those mandatory pieces of information at the top, obviously their name, their caseworker, the pre-screen period. So is this the first time that you've done a SPDAT or a VI SPDAT on them, or is it their 18th? Is it their 3rd? So it can keep track. Again, it's just a little toggle switch to ensure that you have indeed asked the client for consent. The program, you can leave that blank in terms of the per diem funding. You can add some general questions here. And similar to kind of when we were looking at that beds, managing the rooms and beds screen, if I kind of hover over to the right or left-hand side, it gives me the progress panel about how many questions I've answered so far or not answered so far. So if I were to go and just start answering random questions, oh, please fill out the top form first, yes. And it's making sure to pick a particular client and a caseworker. And now I'm going to just go and start entering random answers because I want to be able to kind of see that progress panel on the left-hand side continue to fill out. So right now I only have 9% done and 3 questions have been answered. So it will at least alert me if I were to miss a question, then I can be aware that I didn't answer it. And I'm gonna, yes. If I go over here, I'll be able to see that, oops, look, I missed answering some of those questions. So it just keeps track really quickly. You can pay attention to that, you can not, but it's exactly how the forms, the actual paper forms of the SPDAT or the VI SPDAT are laid out. So you go and enter those and save, and it's obviously going to give you the score, their acuity. So I'm not going to go through and enter all of those particular things, but know that it is laid out the exact sameages as the actual paperwork. So same thing with the actual SPDAT. If I wanted to enter a new one, it's the same thing. It's just the questions are laid out differently with the number scores instead of them mostly yes and no's. And over here, if you're not 100% sure, or if you can't remember offhand, because maybe you're actually sitting here entering a SPDAT directly in and not just from paperwork, if you hover over any of the scores, it's going to tell you actually what that score means. So you don't necessarily have to refer to the paperwork if you don't want. Woo. Progress panel. So that is the SPDAT. So I think at least it's much more streamlined. And again, there will be reports where you can print out, comparison of one person's particular SPDAT to their other assessments that they've had, or you can also print out kind of a general list of, here's all the clients that we've done based on, their acuity or the date that it's been done, and do it that way. There's a new section in here that it's technically new. Well, it exists in HIFIS 3, but people have not used it. So I want to share the magic with you caseworkery, housing loving placement folks. And again, this will be in your documents. There is a housing placement specific module. So it's very, very similar to case management in terms of how it's laid out, in terms of if you wanted to see active cases, if you want to see all the cases. It's technically a function of case management because, placing them in housing. You technically could use HIFIS if, for example, if the registry wanted to list every single available housing unit and a description of, the bedrooms and the landlord and the rent and if there's maintenance. So, I mean, that's kind of a separate thing. But in here, you technically can look at all the folks who have been placed technically through the housing placement module. And again, if there's follow-ups or if it's past the target date or, past their expected move-in date, you can go and follow up with those specific people on your list. So if I was to create a brand new record, this will give me a list of, here's all the people who I have created housing placement records for. But if I'm adding a new record, again, obviously I need to put in a name. And if there's family members, you can add them or not. And in terms of types of housing that they're looking for, again, it's obviously the client's determination what types of housing that they're looking for, but it also might be a conversation or kind of a compromise between, what your agency's policies are and what they're looking for. So they may want, I only want to explore home ownership, but, if that's never going to be a possibility, then perhaps that's a discussion you want to have. But you can pick multiple housing types that they want. So I'm just going to pick right now subsidized social housing. I could go and add a second one or a third one or whatever, however many that I want. You can say that when they, technically started searching. So, and again, it's not for me necessarily to decide, does that mean that's the day that you meet with them? That's the day they fill out, the registry application? Is that the day that they went and looked at a place? That's for you to decide what makes the most sense for you. It will default to today's date, and you can also, again, enter that target date for, they're aiming to try and find a place to live by fill in the date, whatever here. After I save that, it kind of shows up with that client profile, and it's on the client housing placement details list. And it will always have what their current housing placement status is up top. So there's three options. It's either going to show housing not secured, housing secured, or moved in. So makes sense. And depending on what the actual status is, the fields that it actually displays is going to change. So if somebody has already moved into a unit, it's going to tell you when they moved in. It's going to tell you what type of place that they moved into. This person hasn't secured housing yet, so we would not be able to enter those kinds of information. So depending on their particular status at the time, again, there's a few things that you could go and do. You can go and, again, update any documents that you want, of course. The attempts tab is supposed to technically be that, maybe they looked at a place and they decided they didn't like it. So you might want to go and kind of log that they have been making efforts to go and view places. It might be an unsuccessful attempt, but it at least was an attempt. So it can show the work that they have done, or it can be a brand new housing search, which technically the new housing search would then try and link you to existing housing units that we have created in our system, which we will not have because the registry will not be populating their stock in ours. So the new housing search, at least just to show you that if we had stock in here, it would list all the available units. So I'm thinking, down the road, this actually kind of gets me excited that, again, because we have this pressure to kind of move forward in a kind of housing first, reaching home kind of direction, that, wouldn't that be cool if any housing option that we've ever explored, or with different agencies or transitional housing units or whatever, that we could kind of put that, like, wow, look, like Daybreak is going to have a bed next month, or something, that you could go and see what's available kind of within our whole system. So you can add, like I said, an attempt, you can add and secure technically a housing unit. It says it's loading and it's taking a minute. Now I'm scared. So if they have found a place, and this isn't tied to, a unit that has to be already entered into our system. So if they have actually found a place to live, you can then go and enter that information in here. So what kind of place is it? It is, they're going to be living in their family's home, and it will give you some information about, that you can add or not add, that, it's an excellent condition, and here's the address and all the other information, and when they're going to be moving in. So I'm going to put that they're moving in on Saturday. Oops. Address. So now, when I go back to that housing placement details page, it's now changed the placement status from housing not secured to secured. And now it at least kind of gives me some more information about here's where they've technically secured housing and when they're supposed to be moving in. If I knew who the landlord was or how much they're paying rent or that kind of thing, again, you can enter information about that. When they finally do move in, you can, again, click the move in button and say, all is good. Searching for a different unit, it's essentially logging it as an attempt that, something bad happened or something fell through with that particular housing placement. And we have to kind of start from scratch again. So it kind of changes their status back to not secured. So you can, again, edit placement details in terms of like what they're looking for. Once they are moved in, if I go back to the housing placement list and find somebody who is booked in or moved in, okay, so this person, Aaron Fulford, has technically moved into housing. So I can go and just manage any work that might still need to be done. So it's going to tell me, when the person moved in, if they have actually moved in, where, and rent and whatnot. And you'll notice there's two other tabs at the bottom, not just the attempts and the documents, but there's follow-up. So you can go and put, if it's part of your role or somebody's role to go and meet with them and to get them, integrated into their own place, then you can go and enter any time that you're doing that. And include, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, whatever. Are they still in their housing? Did they lose it for some reason? Or you can also go and enter information about any housing allowances or rent subsidies that they might be receiving, just to at least have that on record if the client wants. The helpful thing about the whole housing placement thing is, especially for anybody who does CHIPI reports, so provincial funding that we get for, Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative. So a lot of different agencies will get funding for, a specific, like housing workers will get money for particular service for clients that's geared to moving them kind of throughout a housing continuum, kind of, from the street to shelter to transitional to long-term, or, back and forth in between. And this will at least register very clearly that someone has moved from a shelter to long-term housing, or if that place is transitional housing, we're able to kind of see the flow of their stays, and if they have any issues with housing retention or whatnot, you can work on those things by kind of seeing the bigger picture of maybe how many attempts that they've made, or how long it's taken them to kind of, again, it's all part of kind of case management, but it's just kind of separated out because it's such a big section. It's very hearty. So like I said, that technically exists in HIFIS 3, but I don't think anybody is actually using it. So we're actually wanting people, you don't have to commit to using it, but we'd really love to get any feedback that you have about, does this actually work for, the work that you do? Does it not? Could it work if there were some modifications made? Again, remembering that the people who kind of do the programming of the application don't always have that kind of frontline service lens to kind of look through. So any feedback that you can have, especially on that, would be very, very helpful. I think the last thing that I wanted to do, now I can't read, I need to refer to my notes. It has technically wait lists and storage in here as well. I just wanted to do really quickly. So storage, this is completely new. So I think that, many people, if a client leaves belongings at a place, sometimes you have a paper list, sometimes who knows where it happens to be, but this would at least kind of give you the option to say, an actual record, because, we've even had complaints here at the city where, Deanna, as, the program coordinator for the community shelters, will kind of receive a client complaint saying, I stayed at shelter A and I only been gone for like 18 hours and they threw out all of my belongings that included, photos from when I was a baby or whatever. So if we're able to kind of maintain a list of, an accountable list of here's what we actually have stored and here's for how long, and we did follow a process, and if they have stayed at another shelter, you can actually go and see that, wow, you still have belongings stored at this other place. You may want to go and get them soon. So it's visible among the other shelters as well. So, and again, you can print that. You can, it doesn't have to be add one item. It can be, I added, 3 bags of clothes and, a box that had these things in it and whatever. So it's just at least to point out that it exists. And same thing with wait lists. That it is kind of new that, and I don't know if it would be appropriate for, it could be, for example, like for transitional shelter, like a client who's in shelter waiting to kind of move to the transitional floor or whatever. It could be that we've gotten to a point where now there's a waiting list where you can go and create a list and add clients to that. It could be somebody who's waiting for a single room or someone who needs to be on the ground floor or whatever. So you can add clients and remove that. It can be targeted to whatever it is that you need for yourself. It could be waiting lists for, it doesn't have to be about rooms. It can be that they're waiting for donations of a backpack or a winter coat or, use your imagination. So that's, again, one other thing. I think I feel like we have jumped around to many different topics. Is there any things you want me to kind of either go back on or touch on newly before we kind of, yeah.
Sorry, I was just fooling around with under the housing placement list and trying to move someone in. Would that be booked out before you can move them in?
Yes.
Okay. Wouldn't let me on that minute. Okay.
Yeah, it tries to kind of protect the, you shouldn't be able to move somebody in if they are still technically in a shelter bed. Okay, so that's pretty much the basics. There are, as you well know, like looking at, the front desk or, all the different options from the client information management, there are so many things that HIFIS is capable of doing. That doesn't mean that you will need to technically complete every area of those. If you find an area useful or a certain module useful, even if, 3 other shelters don't use it, you're more than welcome to use what you think is helpful to your work with your clients. We recognize that it's going to be a change. Like I said, we will, as soon as session is done, we will email you my big giant document for you to share. We actually have 2 versions of it. So we have one that includes all the case management, housing placement stuff. And then we have one that's more for just kind of like front desk, booking clients in, booking clients out, adding information. So we know that, again, this is more of you're going to be sharing this wonderful magic-y knowledge with your staff. So you can obviously decide what is the more appropriate kind of job aid document to kind of provide to that person and, skip over the non-essential things. So moving on to kind of what happens on the 21st. So for you folks who might not have been at the meeting, our launch date is November 21st. But as of technically November 20th, we're going to be kind of taking HIFIS offline to kind of do the proper data conversion. So for, at least like 24 hours, you're going to have to resort to like old school paper again. And if you have been around from when we did this in 2010, when we kind of went from all the shelters having their separate HIFISs to one big giant HIFIS, we did the same thing. So it does take, I think, about 22 hours for the data to kind of convert from the HIFIS 3 to HIFIS 4, and then we kind of have to modify user accounts and whatnot. Everyone's user account password should be 123456. Well, not actually pass that on. The accounts, like the usernames won't change. The user rights won't change. Everyone should still have the exact same rights that they currently have, unless you have asked us to change it in whatever way. And then at some point, we're probably going to guess like more the afternoon of the 21st, it will go back online. So I can't tell you if it's going to be like 12 noon or 3 p.m. or 1:30, but we will try and reduce that time as much as possible. But know that it does take a little bit of time and it's not going to be ready at like 9 in the morning. If you have questions about anything, we will be available by email or phone, like almost constantly. I hesitate to say 24/7, but really for the first week or so at least, or even a couple of weeks, we will be available. We will be accessible in the evenings. We will be reachable at whatever times. If there's little errors, obviously we'll know that that could probably wait till the morning. If there's something crazy that's kind of happening, we want to make sure that we're addressing that right away. The information, if anyone actually cares, is technically posted, obviously, by the city. So the city holds the information, but the city does not own all of everyone's information. But it's posted kind of through a server that is based in Canada, located on Canadian soil, not floating in the Homeland Security prone world of data. Very secure. So as Steve had been mentioning earlier, you will be able to access it, without those RSA key fobs and, having to log in 3 different times, which is super fantastic. But it will only be from, the approved computers or the computer IP addresses that have been sent from your agency. So, a staff can't just like go home and decide to log in, if they haven't worked there for like 3 months at their house. We will be exploring the ability to, be using that in a more mobile sense, because there is capacity to be using it from a iPad or a phone or tablet, whatever you want. But you would obviously have to connect kind of through your agency's VPN, like to their network first. And that's something we can kind of talk about as that's happening. At some point in the new year, whether that's earlier or later, there will probably be some new agencies coming on board the HIFIS bandwagon. So right now we have it limited to, our family and our community shelters who kind of have service agreements with the city in terms of you use HIFIS, we give you per diem funding. But we might be expanding it to some of the kind of like housing first non-sheltering agencies, to some of them. So, for example, like Pinecrest Queensway, who deals with like the Families First program. So they're offering housing support to our family shelter clients who, it's the same client pool, they're just offering, non-residential services. There's a chance that, some folks like that might be coming on board. We will need to kind of be working out all these kind of data sharing agreements with any agency that does that. And we'll obviously keep people posted. That's not happening now. We need to focus on getting our current folks kind of settled. And we know that there's going to be some hiccups along the way. And we may not anticipate all the things that may or may not go really well when we kind of flip that switch. So our current shelters are our primary focus. We know that when we launch on the 21st, that it's only 10 short days or 9 short days until people are needing to submit their billing. So we will again be kind of on alert for supporting you if there's any issues with billing. We don't anticipate that anything is going to come up with that, but we want you to feel comfortable to reach out about anything big or small, any question that you have. If after our launch, if you would prefer that we kind of come and assist you with doing some more on-site training or whatnot, we're happy to do that. We just won't have time, obviously, before November 21st to do that. So we will need to make sure that your staff have completed some kind of HIFIS training before they're able to use their account on the 21st or whenever it is that they work after that, if you have casual staff. So whether that's through the training center or you're meeting with them or you give them a job aid document thing and they kind of sign at the end like, yep, read it, all good, tested it out. Whatever method, we're going to be developing kind of almost like an online HIFIS knowledge test thing as well. So we'll hopefully be able to, know if somebody has actually done the mini online course of sorts. And we're going to make sure that there's lots of communication about what's happening. But if you are sharing this information, if you're training any of your staff, if they don't already have an existing HIFIS account or there's any issues, send us an email. We'll make sure to get them set up right away.
Is it our agencies that's gonna give us the user account password?
No, well, if there's any new accounts, it's still something that Steve and I will need to set up ourselves. So, but their existing, if they already have an existing HIFIS account, it will be the same username and their password will be 1234556. Until, like, the first time they log in, you will be asked to change it right away. But that's kind of the default that it's set up to right now. But yes, if for some reason we missed, because right now some agencies are sending us, giant lists of here's all the staff who we need to make sure that, these are the current staff who need, HIFIS rights. And if for some reason we have missed a person or, it's a brand new hire or something, you just send us an email with kind of their name and, what shelters that they need access to, and we'll get them set up as quickly as possible. So yeah, that will still remain with Steve and I. We will still be, responsible for any of the, database maintenance and, any of the upgrades and whatnot. We are hoping that, you folks or, other HIFIS site reps can kind of continue to check in, especially for the first month or so about, are people feeling comfortable entering information in all the fields? So they, entering as much information as possible. Is there follow-up to enter any of the missing pieces that are in there? Are stay dates correct? Are names correct? Is there any areas that people are generally struggling with that, it might technically work, but maybe it's, wah, wah. We want to hear about everything. And we know that, again, the best way that you're going to learn, aside from, this morning and kind of following along, and it's a whirlwind of HIFIS excitement, is you're going to learn more as you're just in there doing stuff. There's nothing stopping you from going home tonight and logging into demo.hifis.ca and playing around till your heart's content. We also actually have a internal demo testing site as well that some staff, if you would like rights to kind of join the early testing of our actual, it's a copy of our actual database with our actual shelters and our actual users and our actual clients. But we were not able to kind of use that today because not all of you have rights to view each other's client sectors. So that's why we went with the HIFIS. But if you would like to kind of check out our development internal HIFIS demo, then send me an email or just let me know real quick. But we realize things are moving really fast. So Steve and I will mostly be kind of your contact people for any of the technical stuff, but feel free to reach out to Deanna and Kale as well. If we're not here, they will pass on information, or maybe they won't. It depends on,
We'll say, wait till Angela gets back.
That's right. They might say, wait till I get back. But yes. And again, also, if you have a chance to check out the actual training center, I don't know why I'm air quoting that because it's a real legit thing in here, but air quotes nonetheless. Like, have I frozen? Because as a trainer, I kind of view things through a slightly different lens, and I'd like to know if people find that, they would be able to learn things properly. If you told your staff, just go and do like the basic or the beyond basics or whatever learning modules, will they actually learn the things that you feel that they need to know? Like, as well as if you were to sit next to them and share all of your wisdom and knowledge. So again, no, it's not 100% completed, but it's actually pretty cool. So again, feedback that you have, please send it my way. And again, this is done by ESDC. So the documents that we will be sending you is the stuff that we have created based on our community's needs. But yes, so that brings us to I was like 11:30, yes. So we're technically done now. And is there any last minute questions, comments, thoughts, observations on life, fun quotes? No? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out this morning, and thank you webinar people for hanging in there if you are still there. And like I said, by the time you get back to your workspaces or tomorrow, if maybe you're not there, I don't know when you're there, that's not my business, but you will have the job aid documents Again, I will send it in a Word document format, so you can feel free to make whatever changes that you want. If you want to just insert the name of your agency instead of service provider, fill your boots. If you don't, that's okay. But yes, I have all the faith that this will be a great change. It's going to be so much more easy to access. It's going to be a lot faster than our current system. Hopefully kind of less weird glitchy messages that kind of pop up. I say these things now, and I'm sure now that I've said that, something is going to blow up, and I don't know what. And you can blame me. It will be my fault, and I'll take that for sure. But yes, let me know if there's any questions or issues that you're having, or any of your trainee folks are having. And yeah, feel free to run away. Thank you guys. Woohoo! We're done. Yay! Whew. Bye, webinar people. Go home now.